Welcome to the show today. Today I have Thomas Landis on the show, and he's the head of F10 Accelerator and Incubator. And I'm very excited to dive a bit into your story, talk a little bit about what's most exciting right now, what's happening right now. So, Thomas, thank you so much for being in the show. Maybe we can start with your story a little bit more. So, can you share a little bit more about what some of the defining moments along the journey, along the way that you feel really shaped you as a human being and shaped you as a leader?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you talk about leader and human being, actually, I think there were actually two things which really shaped me as a leader. I think as a leader, I was playing when I was starting to play baseball at a very high level in Switzerland, and I even was invited once to an American team as into the tryouts, and was playing for 12 days in the US, and there, being in sports and being in the role of a team player, I think that formed me a lot of being also a leader if it comes to working with teams, in offices. So I think from that, I actually learned so much. If it's about competing, if it's about winning, and especially if it's about a team. And if you're familiar with baseball, Swiss people normally are not. But if you are familiar with baseball, it's very often actually you are a single person who does a single sport. On your position, you have to hit the ball or you have to throw a strike. And on the other hand, you can only win as a team. And I think there are a lot of similarities in business and also in being in a great team, especially if it's about innovation. Yeah, this is probably one of the most. And if I look a little bit others, what also was shaping, I think my parents, and this sounds like, well, my parents were always nice and so. No, they were nice and I loved them and everything. But actually, if I look back, my mother embarrassed me so often. And my father, on the other hand, he's the most hated customer. So what they have in common and what I learned from them, and I think this is pretty useful as an innovation manager as well, is actually they were always questioning whatever they have been told. So I remember meetings in school or Elternabend where everything was clear and my mother was questioning the whole school system. Or I remember moments when we went to Carnival, everybody was dressed up as a cowboy, and somehow I was always a political statement my mother wanted to give to the crowd. So, and I think that really shaped me actually on being a person who's challenging the status quo constantly.
These are some really big ones, yeah, and it also goes already into the people, because I think usually it has a lot to do with the people, when you get shaped along the way, and it's very, questioning everything is a very powerful one, as well. The first one as well that you shared on the sports side, but I think that one as well in terms of, there's this thing that's hanging on my wall that says "Ask better questions," and I think that is such a good theme. Yes. On a daily basis, and you just basically you went into a beautiful story there. So what I'm also very interested in always is what drives people. Like what is it that motivates them, that gets them out of bed every morning? So what is that for you? I mean, why do you get up every single morning and go out there and do the fun work and the challenging work and just go and do the things?
Well, first of all, what gets me out of bed is actually, I do need a job still. I still need some salary. But besides that, actually, what do I like to do and why do I like it? I think my strength is also my weaknesses. I'm a very self-motivated person. So means if I do something I like and I see a meaning, or at least I see a meaning, then actually I want to work on this as often as possible and as long as possible. And but the other thing is, if I don't like it, I'm not doing it. And this probably is a pain in the ass for all of my bosses. Sorry. So I think that this actually drives me. So if I see the purpose and if I see actually I have a good team, I have a goal which makes sense from my point of view and where we can really achieve something, then I think everything else comes easy.
So that's a big one. I mean, the meaning, the purpose behind things and being able to work in an environment that supports, that sort of like that meaning, that personal passion as well, and that drive forward in the same direction that you wanted to go, I think is absolutely key. And I mean, is there, you know, from the work you've done, from the things you're involved in, is there some sort of a red thread that you see walking through your life that, you know, just maybe a passion thread or a purpose thread or something like that, that red line?
Yeah, you know, I work in a corporate. I work actually in a corporate, and the same corporate for quite some years, I think 16 or 17 years already, all combined. But I have already quit here 3 times. So, and I think what I really see as a threat is, you know, as an innovation manager or as a product manager, I also was for a very long time. You know, if it comes to marketing, if it comes to innovation, everybody has an opinion on it. But unfortunately, especially in innovation, not everybody understands it. But the problem is, the higher you have to go in the hierarchies of your management, people think because of the hierarchy they understand innovation, but they simply do not. And you know, the good thing is very often my innovations were too radical, and I was allowed to do the things. And suddenly, when they were more and more successful, I got more attention, and the intention level climbed up in the hierarchy. And the more and more successful innovations became, the more management was talking into it. And that always actually killed 2 main things, which drove the whole process before. It was the team was not dedicated anymore because they could not decide. There were people who thought they understand it better than the subject matter experts who worked on it. And the others is actually, the politics which kicked in. Suddenly, it's not about what is good for the product and the market and the company. It's more of what is good for a specific manager which needs a success in his CV. So there I see some big threats, yes, and I see them constantly.
So let's maybe talk about innovation a little bit, because it's you know, I think it's a word you repeated many, many times already. So let's talk about this a bit more in detail. So what is innovation for you? So what does it mean to you? And also, why are you excited about innovation as a thing?
Well, excitement is probably because of my childhood. You know, questioning status quo is probably the reason why I'm interested in innovation. But no, innovation for me is actually create something that creates a new value and that is working. And I mean, working means it must have a proven technology and it must have a proven market, meaning a person who is willing to pay money. And this is very, very often related to, hey, your innovation must solve a problem. And if there is a problem which you can solve with your new solution, then people will be willing to pay for it. And very often innovation is not solving a problem. Well, then it's not innovation, then it's a lesson learned, which is, from my point of view, also a lot of innovation. And this is probably also something which I see, especially in the financial world, where I do work in fintech and banks and insurances. Learning in innovation means you can fail 99 times out of 100. That's what Mr. Edison said, I think 200 years ago, 100 years ago. So, but this has no value in banks and insurances. So it's useless for them. It's, when will we be successful? But those learnings are so important in innovation because you found out how it does not work. And this is why I think it's so essential. And this is also one thing which drives me working together with startups on a corporate innovation department. Because with startups, you have on one hand, you have a team who has passion, who has pride for their solution, and who has actually the agility to fail early. And from a corporate point of view, if you're smart enough and you spend time and you give them what they need, you learn so much from them. At the end of it, you both will be more successful and hopefully also smarter. And so this all combined is for me, innovation.
That's very powerful. It's also, a very practical definition. You know what I mean? Instead of giving a Wikipedia sentence, I love that you told a story around it, because it's much more powerful. It's much easier to understand, at the essence, what innovation actually is. And you talked a lot about, the lessons learned out of things. So I want to dive a little bit into that as well. Now, there's probably been some interesting lessons that you learned along this way as well, along the journey. If you had to point out one or two of the most important lessons that made a big impression on you along the journey, what would they be?
Team matters. It's only about the team. No matter what innovation I was working on, those innovations which were successful were actually where I had a team around me, or where I was a part of a team, where people were actually dedicated for changing something 7/24. And I saw very boring people working for years as a banking product manager, which joined such a movement of changing something. And suddenly it very often started with they changed how they were dressed. So, and then it came like they came earlier, they stayed longer, they were starting smiling, they were actually questioning what their bosses were saying and things like that. And this was probably, this is actually my main learning. It matters so much about the team. So you really have to focus on having the right guys on your team. This is key.
That's a very powerful one. And also, what you mentioned before is or in this story is like, there were people that sort of like seemed, not very interesting, maybe it was not very interesting to engage with them. They weren't really engaged. And because of the environment and because of the meaning that their work had, which suddenly changed, they changed because I guess they went back to being humans.
Yes.
Again.
Yes.
And that's a massive change as well, because sometimes I hear about organizations and it's like, oh, we don't have the right people and this and that and this and that, and of course that can be the case, but very often it has a lot to do with the environment as well. And yes. if the environment can be changed, not everybody's always going to be on board, of course not, but yeah. We can go from 3% to 20%, you know what I mean? And yes. And that's a huge difference, and it's about the engagement that people have in things. And it's so deep when you say it's about the team, it's about the people, it's also about the environment that people engage in. It's very
exactly. I mean, and this you can read in so many smart books about innovation. What I always try to explain to people is, look at innovation as a triangle. If you try to balance in the middle, you need to have on one corner, you need to have a strategy which gives you resources and money. On the other angle, you need to have actually the right kind of solutions behind it, which can drive you in the right direction. But what you can actually not buy with money is actually having the right culture and the right people in it. And bringing this triangle in the balance is actually very, very difficult. You can have a lot of money, you can have the best strategy on paper, but, and you have a good structure and maybe also very nice product management and everything. But if you don't have the culture and this culture drives the people actually to push it forward, then you will not be successful in innovation.
Yeah, it's a very interesting triangle as well. And, and because, it can't really stand on just two of those. It's like a chair, yes. A chair doesn't stand well on just two legs. If you had a third one, it's very stable, right? But it can never just stand on two legs. Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about leadership, in this, specifically in this world of innovation and balancing different stakeholders and expectations and all these kinds of things. So the main question, maybe we can start at a bit of a higher level, is the main question that I have: how are you able to go into work every day and do the things you're doing and balance all the expectations and all the stakeholder interests and all these kinds of things without going insane?
Actually, I must say I'm very lucky, especially at the moment, since actually I have best of two worlds. I work in an accelerator, which is supported by corporates, by banks, insurances, Six Group. And on the other hand, I work in a startup environment. And where I'm lucky is actually the whole corporate world is somehow held away from me and my team. I'm very lucky that I have my boss who's working as, sorry for the words, a shit umbrella. And he takes so much things out of my daily pains that I actually really can focus with my team to execute things. And this is very important if it comes to being happy working wise and also being successful. Because yes, we can talk about, am I allowed to use a MacBook in a corporate world? Am I allowed to use Slack? I don't have to discuss this, luckily. I have a boss who lets me do it. But on the other hand, I'm so more efficient with using just those two tools. And this is actually key for me. So, but again, I mean, it's about people. If my boss leaves, will my new boss question, hey, why you have a MacBook and why you have Slack? Haven't you write advice number 25 about, it might change. So let's knock on wood. So he will stay for quite a time.
That's a huge point, having the right, leaders, having the right managers, having the right boss. There's also a great saying that goes, choose your boss carefully.
Yes.
And that's a big one. That's a very big one. Another one I want to talk about in terms of leadership is, how do you make sure you get the right people on board? So, in terms of hiring, in terms of getting the right resources internally, how do you make sure you get the right, how do you know you get the right people?
Well, first question, how do I get the right people? Mainly, and HR doesn't like me for that, because normally I try actually to hire two kind of people. One are coming out of my network or my network of my team. So meaning one of my team members refers somebody to my team. And the other is using it with the Twitter followers also, meaning posting, maybe looking for this. So I'm looking mainly for self-motivated people. So, for example, I just hired a trainee, which is not a key person from an outside world, but from an inside world. If you're a team of 8, he's so key because he gets the administration done. He makes sure that stuff works, which would be hell if it doesn't. So, and this person, if you look at his CV, it didn't look good. On one hand, he was quitting jobs, his last 2 jobs, very quickly. And if you look at his marks he had at university, on some topics he was very bad, and some he was very good. And so this, showed us something that he's like a person who's probably very much self-motivated. And when you invited him for an interview, we learned very quickly, why did he quit those 2 jobs? He said, well, I was doing meaningless stuff. I was so bored. Yes, it paid me a salary, but sorry, this is not why I studied. So we said, well, we kind of like that guy, so let's hire him. And I must really say, I hope he doesn't hear it, but I'm very much impressed of him. So I think this little story actually shows it. It's if you hire people who are self-motivated, and this starts with wild applications for it and writing in the applications why they are delighted working for a company like you, then this is probably also a good indicator. And the other thing is, if you trust to your team members that they bring in good other people's, it's actually already a given that you will have at the end a good team, because it's nobody wants to refer a person in your team which is not getting things done.
That's a huge one. Yeah, it's also what I heard is once again about the team. You don't look at this just as an effort for you, but it's more of a collaborative thing together with your team. That they use their channels, you use your channels, and it's a lot more than just, we got a job, we need to fill it. It's a lot more on an ongoing basis, and exploring the market and talking to people and seeing if there's a fit, and here and there, and also some interesting indicators there. Now, once people are in the team, how do you make sure people work together well? Do you hire for that specifically, so they have different sort of characteristics and profiles and things like that? Or do you focus more on on creating a certain environment, or how do you make sure people work together well?
Well, first of all, of course, we have jobs to be done, and we have different kind of roles which must fit. And we normally sit together and look at what kind of roles are not well executed yet, and is somebody in the team able to take over that role? And if not, do we find somebody on the market who's able to do that? And then basically it's actually very often the team who makes the decision. Is this a new hire or not? And once they are in the team, I think best thing is give them good goals and then let them be. Let them get things done. And if you have managed actually a team where you have self-motivated people who are doing their own things done, and you actually just need some time to coordinate that everybody runs in the same direction, then you don't need to manage them too much, because they're managing themselves, and they actually enjoy having freedom of making their own decisions. And everybody wants to make good decisions. I think everybody deep inside wants to do a good job. And once they have found out that, then they work together well as a team, because very quickly they found out, again, small team, we have a lot of things we need to do. Hey, we can only perform if we work together. And I think then you have actually one good thing. If people are extremely busy, and mean busy on a good way, they want to get things done, they don't have time to start bitching about each other. So this is actually taking away all the energy. And of course, very important as well, you need to have very direct communication. So in our program, we teach the startups and also the corporates actually how to give feedback. And those feedback tools are also very important in the team. Giving an honest feedback is much more valuable than just saying something nice. And since we have this culture, talking directly to the startups, we also live this in our team, which is not always very, very nice, but everybody understands it and brings things forward.
Yeah, that's a powerful way. I mean, there's a couple of key things you mentioned. One is just making sure people sort of like know what their role is and expectations and everything, and also not trying to be the manager too much, but understanding that if things are right, then there's probably less management needed. One thing I have about that is, or question I have, so how do you make sure that goals, the goals that are set and the KPIs or whatever you have out there are actually reached without micromanaging things? How do you make sure?
Well, on one hand, we have, team, we have like every 4 months or so, we do have a strategy workshop where we sit together again and say, well, where are we today? Where do we want to go in the future? And how do we get there? So meaning, what are our 6 months goals? What have been our 6 months goals like 4 months ago? What has changed? What are the goals for the next year? What are the goals for the next 2 years? And in the discussion in those workshops, together with the team, we define actually what kind of goals we have. And then we also define in those road mapping strategy workshops, I would call them, well, who's taking over what role? Who goes in the lead with which little project? And who drives it? And once again, we're going out then, we have set as a team actually what are the goals. We have said who is responsible for what task, and then everybody is actually excited to execute it.
So what I hear a lot is this theme of co-creation in there. I mean, in everything, in terms of bringing the right people on board, that's a co-creation effort. The recruitment is a co-creation effort. The decision is a co-creation effort. The way things are shaped is a co-creation effort. The setting the goals and discussing the strategy, that's a co-creation effort. So that's sort of like a red thread that I hear throughout the entire team and everything.
Yeah, well, yes, most of the decisions are in the co-creation, but of course we do have to agree on a common strategy. But if there are some misunderstanding, we try to find in the team. So what are the different kind of pros and what are the different kind of contrast? And if it's coming to an end and we don't find a decision, yes, then unfortunately me as a head, I have to make a decision. And yes, since we are in a corporate accelerator, sometimes also the corporate wants to guidance us somehow. And yes, everybody understands, yes, we have to smile and say, yes, we love to do that. And then we do it. Probably not with as much passion, but.
Sure. I mean, that's always a balancing act, of course, where there's always a balancing act and things like that. But at the essence, I mean, you know, maybe it's just because that's the way you do things anyway. And you sort of like go like, yes, it's co-creation, but well, I think I mean, the way I hear this from you, I mean, it's probably more co-creation than most of the people I talk to in terms of how they lead and how things are done. Now, another one is like, I mean, it goes a little bit in the direction of what you already shared, but I want to raise it anyway. So how do you actually make sure that you trust your people? So how do you let go of control and trust your people? I know maybe you say, well, this is just the way I do things, but maybe this is just my mindset. But is there something there that you consciously do that you have an awareness about?
Well, let's say like this, you know, I mean, I give them a trust with giving them a working contract. And they have been studied, they have been somehow assessed to be in my team. We pay them a good salary. So I think this is a lot of trust, and that would be actually stupid if I now think I have to manage this person who is so well educated and so well paid from me. So meaning actually there is a very high level of trust I give into my people. I think normally I trust all my team members that they can get things done. I see my role as being their boss is actually just where do they need help from me. So it's not that I want to tell them what they have to do, it's probably that I want to support them not running in the wrong direction. And meaning I look at it like if I'm playing with my children, I also try to let my children do whatever they can, but I don't want them to get hurt. So I probably try to catch them before they fell on the ground, because I can explain them that, see, I told you, but thankfully Daddy's here. So, and I think it's the same with actually your employees.
Yeah, that's a really big. It's also an interesting comparison with the children. You know, it's a fairly, I mean, it's simple, but at the same time, it requires a certain mindset about things as well. And you know, basically saying, well, it's not about telling people what to do and how to do it and all these kinds of things. It's about the other side, which is basically making sure they're not running in a completely different, you know, wrong direction, so to say, or they get hurt in a you know, in some sense, right?
You know, I very often look at it also as being from a being lazy point of view. You know, whatever my employees are doing and whatever decision they take, I don't have to take. So this gives me actually more time to do something else. And so that's also one thing I always try to do when I hire somebody new and he starts, that this person knows from the first day actually what the goal is and what his job is and what he can or she can do if it comes to decisions. And then I can back off quickly and get my things again. So yeah, I think we don't have the time, and I don't have the patience to micromanage them. So I'm very happy if they make their own decisions, because then I don't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, that's a very good thing, definitely. And also what you mentioned, I think is core is one thing is responsibility, which is you know, this is role expectations and all these kinds of things, or like, you know, the actual role. But the other thing is the actual decision power, because what totally doesn't work is, well, you're responsible for that, but I make the decisions. It completely breaks everything. So being able to assign all the decision-making power with the role, which sometimes is uncomfortable, you know, but I think that's absolutely key. Now, the last question I want to dive into is a bit more up in the clouds. So let's imagine for a second that you're a magician and you got a magic wand. So you got a genie wish right now. So if you could wish for anything in the world, what is it that you would wish for that could multiply your impact on the work you do, on the industry, on the business, on the world in general?
Okay, well, work related. I was about to say, you know, world peace. But beside world peace, I would probably wish, you know, as said, in innovation, very often, ideally, people who have no clue about innovation. And it's the same if you work with startups. You know, we have brilliant startups in our program which really solve a problem for the customers of the bank and the insurances. But it needs, on the other hand, of the bank or the insurance, it needs the people who sit down with those and get things done. And very often, yes, they have one person which is an innovation manager who knows how to do it, but then it stops, you know. You come then back in the actually the backlog of a big corporate and say, yes, this is nice, but doesn't have time for tomorrow or the next year, and things like that. So if I would have this match, one, I would hope that people, all the people in actually the decision chain of corporates and companies as well, do better understand how to innovate and how important this is. This very often starts with prioritizing it higher. You know, everybody always says, yes, innovation is very, very important, but let's do it tomorrow. So meaning innovation is always important, but never urgent. And if you look at digitalization at the moment, I'm sorry, we missed a lot of very big trends. Look at the big fives, they will challenge the banks more and more in the future. And even if they don't want to be a bank, maybe. But they will simply do because they are taking over the whole ecosystem. Yes, and meaning if we would have a better understanding in that, and if people would actually act more agile, then I think we would probably have a better world.
I like that one. You know, it goes back, it closes the loop to the very beginning where we talked about, you know, innovation and understanding innovation. I love that. Now, what we're going to do is below this video, we're going to link to some of the sources. So we're going to link to the company page. We're going to link to your LinkedIn profile so people can stay up to date on what's happening, on the most exciting things that you guys are working on, but also, of course, connect with you on social media and things like that. So Thomas, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.